Recently, one-base, two-gas styles have been extremely popular from Terran, and defending the infinite possibilities is very tough for Protoss players. Luckily, we have the previous GSL champion herO to help us through these tough times, as I've copied the approach he used to beat this style in the GSL. So if you're looking for a strategy to do when they open two-gas, or just deny your scouting, this video will help you learn how to crush these aggressive Terran styles. Let's just jump right on to game number one. This was a game in a series that I played in the DH Atlanta Qualifiers versus Seether, my Terran rival. I know that a lot of Terran players recently have been throwing out so many aggressive two-gas builds, oftentimes on one base or with a very late expansion. So I wanted to come in with a new style, a new solution. And luckily I was watching herO in the GSL, and what he did I thought was really brilliant in how he tackled this problem. Now there's two ways, or there's two issues that you have to deal with. The first issue is you do not know what Terran is going to be doing. They could be playing economically, they could be playing very aggressive, they could be somewhere in the middle, something that requires you to get detection, something that requires you to have a lot of ground units. So because of that, you need a sort of catch-all style, and it can be very difficult to choose between Stargate play and Robo play. If you go Twilight, you're just insane. Like honestly, if you build a Twilight Council, you're just asking to die to Widow Mines, you're asking to die to Proxy Hellion, all kinds of aggressive plays. Even a small tank push on one base is very tough to deal with when you open Blink, because Blink takes forever to research and you don't have detection, right? So that's the big issue with that. Now Stargate is really good against the more economic plays, but against Reactor Widow Mine, then it can be very tricky. You just don't have enough detection or enough units to deal with it. So that leaves us with Robo, and Robo, if they're being a bit more economic, isn't as good, but this style in particular is very potent. Now, one thing that we have to talk about. I'll pause this at 1 minute and 46 seconds. At this time, a Marine is finishing. You need to be scouting whether or not they're going for a Marine first or a Reaper first. So in this game, I think I just sort of guessed that it was going to be a Reaper. Let's say you come across the map and the barracks is 2 hexes to the left, you're full walled, your probe can't get in, you can't get in and see the double gas like I did in this game. What do? You patrol your worker on the ramp up until 1 minute 46. Because that is when the Marine is going to finish. If you do not see a Marine, it has to be a Reaper, right? So you know that he's going for the more economic, slower, two-gas sort of playstyle. If you see a Marine, then alarm bells need to go off in your head, because it's probably going to be a one-base play. It's probably going to be 3 racks out here, or just 2 racks with a proxy marauder, and what you need to do is add shield batteries at that point and chrono boost out units. Whereas in this game, I mean, we're still going to be doing that, but we're not worried, because we know it's going to be a Reaper. And I'll also tell you guys later, stick around for this one, the trick if your probe gets stuck in their base, because it's really beautiful and really elegant. So back at home, it's the completely standard build order. We opened up with 20 Nexus, 21 Core, well, you could go 21 Core, there's a bit of contention in the Protoss community at the moment. But either 20 or 21 Core is fine, 21 Gas, 22 Pylon, very easy and standard. We're going to add a shield battery and start Stalker production, and I am immediately chrono boosting my Stalker. I'm saving another chrono boost for another chrono boost on my gateway, so that I can get out 3 Stalkers very early and quickly. I'll then be adding a Robo behind this, and when I add the Robo, I'm going to take 2 people of gas, so 1 from each. And the reason why we're doing this is because Robo, quite mineral intensive, building probes is quite mineral intensive, getting up to 3 gateways, it costs a lot of minerals, and it doesn't really require much gas. Especially if you want to get a warp prism, you're going to need to be able to get as many minerals as possible. And so there we go, added the Robo, and took people off gas. Now let's talk about something that could be happening, and this is very common in this game, so I push back the Reaper, is that a Reaper Hellion force, it could be multiple Hellions, multiple Reapers, is coming across the map. And that's one reason why I added a shield battery at my natural, because they can actually fight Stalkers pretty decently well. It is also okay if you didn't want to build this pylon here, to build the pylon in the main base and add a shield battery here. That is also totally fine. You do maybe get into a bit of trouble if they're opening Marine first and it is Proxy Marauder, because the way you hold that is with shield batteries in the natural. Another location, and I know herO likes to do this as well, is maybe building it here, and you can build shield batteries. Now we look at what Seether's doing. It doesn't really matter, because we have no idea what he's doing, right? He could be doing anything at this point. We just have to assume and account for everything. But he's going for a high ground expansion. It was after the factory, but before the starport. So I have 3 stalkers out now. I've added 2 gateways forming a wall in my natural. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be spreading out a pylon up here, maybe even down here, leaving just enough units in the wall. The rest come into my main base. One thing that I'm scared about is I'm scared about Hellion drops. So I add a shield battery into the main base. But this is doubly useful because it could also be good against a Banshee that comes across the map. You know, essentially I'm going to have Banshee protection. I'm also going to have protection against Ravens. I'm also going to have protection against the 1 medevac drop that tries to pull you out of position. So this shield battery, because we're not taking a very quick third base, we can afford it. It doesn't really cost us anything and saves us a lot of time and energy. So his medevac is coming across the map. I've been warping in stalkers. I went 2 observers. The first one goes across the map. The second one stays with my army, because it could be an armory widow mine drop where they're invisible. And then I've added a warp prism. And the warp prism is the key component of this strategy early on. Just always pull the workers away. There's no need to panic. So there we go. Dealt with that. Pull workers away. Send 1 back. Okay, I lost 1 worker. Doesn't really matter. So now we've dealt with the widow mine drop. Or we've dealt with the Hellion drop. We've dealt with the pressure from our Terran opponent. What do? We only have 5 stalkers and a warp prism. Do not warp in any more stalkers because they're very expensive. And we don't have blinks, so they're not that useful. But I'm going to be picking up 4 stalkers into my warp prism and sending them across the map. Let's have a look. He has 1 tank at home. Second tank is about to be halfway done. And he has a bunch of marines. Okay. It's not many units. 4 stalkers is the ideal amount because they one-shot an SCV. So I'm just going to be unloading in the dark distance and just run in and snipe as many SCVs as I can. I'm just going to run into the mineral line. 1, 2, 3. It's very, very hard for Terran to deal with this. Especially when he's so spread out, right? He only has 2 tanks. And you can just pick up. And I'm going to go to the natural. I'll get a couple more workers here while I'm, dealing with a widow mine drop at home. Microing it. Can tank 3 tank shots. I get a couple more SCVs. So let's look at the state of the game. We are at 50 workers, our opponent's at 31. Okay, this is because we didn't take any damage and he's so low on units that the Stalker counterattack is so effective. So this game is essentially in a really good spot. Now let me show you what the follow-up is. And we're going to have to go back just a little bit for this. So, as you clean up the Terran aggression, Warp Prism's done, you're sending the 4 Stalkers out, we're going to be adding a Twilight and a Forge. Very, very simply, this is the follow-up. And we're importantly going to be getting this before our 3rd base. We're going to be playing an extended 2 base. It's not like we're not getting a 3rd base, but we really want to tech up quickly. If you go for a 3rd base right now, your tech is so delayed that it can be very hard dealing with a tank push or something that just gets in your face really quickly because, your charge might be late, your +1 armor might be late. So I add Twilight Council Forge, then go and take a 3rd Nexus. And the great thing about this is that you are entirely done with your macro, essentially. You're all set up. You don't have to look back at your base while you're microing your Stalkers, which is what's about to happen. But I have warped into 2 sentries. So like I said, Stalkers are very expensive. Sentries are very cheap on minerals. So as we want to take a 3rd Nexus, it's really good to add them and they're very useful. I'm also going to be adding an Immortal very quickly. And so when herO plays this style, what herO likes to do is to have continuous Immortal production. I don't like it as much. I think that going up to 6 gates is more important, so I don't tend to do this. I'm going to add Charge and +1 armor. Now obviously, I'm microing at home and on my side of the map. Charge +1 armor, 2 gateways. I think 5 gates is a good number, but like I said, herO likes to just build continuous Immortal production. So he would not build these 2 gateways. And then, importantly, you get the Templar Archives. So what's actually going to happen now is I'm going to send my Warp Prism home. Yes, I could go in and I could continue to be annoying, but, a Viking might come out, might snipe it, might deal pressure on it. So I'm just going to send my units home. It's nothing to be worried about. And the next part of the plan, get Storm and do a Storm drop. We're not going to be Storm dropping our opponent's economy though. I mean, if your opponent is turtling and is never, you know, pushing out on the map, he's taking a third base, yeah, you can go for a Storm drop on the SCVs. But in this case, we're going to be doing it on the army. And the idea is, we've kept our observer alive, so we're going to be able to see when he's moving out. This is a great thing about this observer, right? We know he's still sitting at home. You know, we've seen Marines, we haven't seen anything move out the center of the map. He has tanks, how he's going to move out, right? So we can Chrono Boost Storm, we can get 3 High Templar and a Warp Prism. I found that to be a really good number. 4 is a bit too much. And then we just warp in more High Templar at home. Because all we have to do... he hampered his own economy. I mean, it's not terrible playing 2 gas styles, but he hampered it, and then we dealt damage. So all we have to do is deal with this 2 base push, and that means warp in lots of High Templar, lots of Zealots, Immortals if you can afford them, or go up to, you know, 8 gateways, as I'm doing here, 2 more gateways. Add shield batteries, add cannons. One thing that I didn't talk about before, I sort of mentioned it. Oftentimes, a 1 medevac drop will arrive into your main base right now. You know, this original medevac will pick up 8 Marines and drop. I add a cannon. You know, once I'm on 3 bases, I add a cannon here and just deals with everything. In this game, he's actually sending a Liberator, and the Liberator will die to the cannon, but if it was a 1 medevac drop, same sort of thing. So, I'll just go back very briefly. Our observer is seeing the move out. Sure, it dies, which is a bit unfortunate. I would have loved to have kept this alive. But immediately when I see the move out, I'm sending the Warp Prism across the map. It could have been in the middle of the map as well, but that's fine. Now, unfortunately, I guessed the wrong attack path. I thought he was going to come down to the south. So that's where I'm sending my Warp Prism. Mainly because on this map, this kind of location is a very typical location where Terran pushes through. But I get it wrong, right? He's actually moving up to the north, and it's important that I never miss his army, so I send a Zealot out to meet it. I covered both attack paths. What I would have done was I would have sent, let's say another universe, I would have sent my Warp Prism to the north side, and then a Zealot to the south side, so I never miss his army movement. And now that I see his army here, what's the plan? Storm drop it. Just get right on top, deal as much damage as possible. And especially if they stim to try and catch it, too easy. I can talk a little bit about the microing of it. There's 3 different ways, I think, to micro Storm drop in Warp Prisms. Either you don't have the High Templar hotkeyed, and you just box select the High Templar when it drops. Remember, you want to use the unload key, the hotkey, and click on the Warp Prism as it's moving, so that it doesn't lose its acceleration. And then you just box select the High Templar and Storm. That's how a lot of the Korean players do it, like parting, but they are quite advanced. The way I do it, and the way I recommend, is I have my High Templar on another hotkey. So my Warp Prism as a hotkey, my High Templar as a hotkey, and I just press the High Templar hotkey when I drop it, cast Storm. The last way to do it, and I've never done it, but some people do, is they have the High Templar and the Warp Prism on the same hotkey, so you just have to press the Warp Prism hotkey again, and that will then allow you to cast, just because of priorities, Storm straight away. I even get a feedback on the Raven, which is really, really nice. But at this point, you know, we've dealt so much damage, wasted so much medevac energy. Yeah, Liberator comes to our main base, but we have the cannon. Would have been able to warp in some Stalkers as well. The big strength that tank pushers have when you attack head-on into them, right? So I'm going to be coming around to a different angle, trying to come up from this way, trying to come up from behind. Leaving the High Templar here with a few Zealots, and the cannons and the shield batteries do the rest. It's very hard for them to, you know, stim on through, right? So don't really have to be too worried. Don't take a bad fight. Take your time with this, especially if you're ahead. Patience is the key. Warp in 8 more Zealots. You will get ahead by doing this. I'm trying to think, how do I zoom out? Oh, I don't know the hotkey. Oh well, it's fine. So yeah, just take your time. I have a Storm at the front. Lose a cannon, but it's okay. Setting up the biggest flank of all time. It's going to be very, very hard for Seether to deal with this, right? because the Widowmine's going to be dealing friendly fire, you're going to have Storm raining in, and at this point just F2. Seriously, just F2. It's the best way to approach the situation. Big storms go down, and I take the win. So this has been a really effective way of dealing with a 2-gas opening out of Terran. It's a very, very effective style, and I loved that herO showed me how to do this. And now I'm going to show you another variation where you can get very, very aggressive. So, in this game, it was played from another qualifier up against Azure. I actually get my probe trapped in his base, because, you know, he spawned on this side of the map, so he doesn't need to leave space for a reactor. And I'll show you the nice little trick. Again, we're going to be scouting to see, I see 2 gases, I'm going to be scouting to see whether or not it's a marine first. Very important. So my probe goes up. 146 is the time. And I'm not too worried. I think in game number 1 of this series, he didn't open with a marine. But there we go, 146. We're trapped in his base. No marine, it's a Reaper then, therefore go back into our standard game plan that I showed you in the last game. But the nice thing here is that what you can do is actually just recall the probe, okay? You do it around 1 minute 55, because that's when the Reaper's about to finish. Recall it. And if you're wondering about the economics of doing this, it's actually quite good. There's 2 benefits to it. One, the Reaper oftentimes takes longer to get to your side of the map because you've drawn it into a corner. If this SCV wasn't finishing my probe, he would have gone all the way in because he wouldn't have seen the recall. So try and hide the probe in a corner and then recall it. But the other advantage is you essentially just created a probe out of nothing by doing that recall, because that probe is very unlikely to get home. So economically, it's very effective to lose that chrono boost, but to use that recall. So don't worry too much about it. One thing I'll note in this game, I am going again 3 Stalkers, Robo. But what I've done is I actually built my second pylon in my main base. And I'm building a shield battery here. And this is often how herO would like to play it. But skipping forward, again, I'm adding a, as we just pause it, I'm adding another shield battery, adding a gateway in the natural. And like I said, it's very common that Hellions and Reapers come across the map. If he was to run into the main base right now, the shield battery would defend it just fine, so we're not worried about that. We're actually very, very safe. But because I want to get aggressive in this game, and I said I promise you aggression, we're only going to build 2 gateways. Now you can build 3 gateways if you don't get bullied too much, but I'm actually going for a Warp Prism first out of the Robo. So it is very hard to afford, especially when you want to get this pylon down here. Again, it's spotting. It's very hard to afford the 3rd gateway. So Warp Prism straight away. And the beauty of it in this game is that he's going for a Reactor Widowmine, right? This is a very, very aggressive playstyle that doesn't have any units. Again, I'm adding Twilight Forge, normal transition. The Widowmines do come in. There is actually a huge Widowmine shot gain in this game. A bit late on that pull, losing 8 workers. That's not very good, is it? But, what do we have? We have Stalkers. Walked in straight into his main base. The same principles apply as last game that I showed you. You one-shot SCVs. Be very careful about attacking the ones in the gas geyser. That can be a real tricky spot because oftentimes they might dodge the last shot. Unfortunately, I'm going to lose the last Stalker here. Very sad. That's because I'm losing ever more workers at home. Yet another drop into the main base as well. So, obviously very, very tricky. With this style, if you go Warp Prism first, you want to keep your first Observer back at home. And I lose 6 more there because I did not see this Widowmine. So, I mean, we're still up in workers. But we have units in his base. That's going to be very, very hard. Try to do the best micro that you can. What you can do is dodge Widowmine shots completely with the Warp Prism. But just moving around, being annoying. They don't have the production usually to deal with this. And so we can just fast forward, go into the natural, awesome. And then what I'm thinking, well, I dealt with all the medevacs, right? He still has no units. We can walk in a few more Stalkers, and just keep pushing. All the Stalkers that we warped in at home, they now come across the map. And they're just so aggressive because, you know, I can pick up 4 Stalkers in the Warp Prism, forcing him to commit defenses to the natural at this point. But what I could do instead, you know, once the rest of my army joins up, is I could pick them all up, drop into the main base, right? You know, drop in here, ferry them in. So it's very, very flexible how you want, or how you can go about killing your opponent in this game. There we go, walking more stalkers. And I'm just going to push right up the middle. I'm not too fussed about this. And all this pressure caused him to float a lot of resources because he was running SUVs around, didn't have the production ready, and there we go, GG is gone. So this style that herO showed me in the GSL is a very, very effective strategy where you can be very safe and aggressive against these 1 base 2 gas plays. If you want to see more from herO, I did another video on another aggressive PvT build shown here.